Hello and welcome back to the 2025 panel. I am so excited to have one of my regular guests. She's here every single year. Always one of the first people I ask to come back. This is Laura from Black Light Astrology. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
She's all the way in the States. It's midday here as I record, and it is evening for Laura. So thanks for your time this afternoon for you. Happy to have you back, and we're talking about a great, very very cerebral energy that's happening next year, which I'm very pumped that Laura's going to unpack for us. It was her first option, and she got it. I'm just like, yes, you've got this one. I'm nailing this for you. So yeah, super excited to have you back, Laura. Always love talking to you. Mm.
Me too. I love it.
So, as usual, let's ask this question that I've been asking to all the astrologers. And that question is, what is your chart ruler and how has that played out in your life? How have you integrated it? How has it led your life as the helmsman of your ship? What is that chart ruler doing for you and saying? And let us know. Give us some secrets around that for you, Laura.
All my secrets being revealed. Yeah, I have a Venusian ruled chart, just like you. I'm very Venusian. I'm a Libra rising. So Venus is my chart ruler. Natally, I have her at 7 degrees of Leo, conjunct my moon on my midheaven in the 10th house. But with my Libra rising, I also have a conjunction, a perfect conjunction of Saturn and Pluto on the ascendant. So it's intense. It's a Libra rising and it's a Venusian chart, but it is about the intensity of the
Mm,
relationship, the massive highs and the massive lows, and power and control. And that has been true my entire life long. You know, and a lot of my followers know I was raised in a cult,
mm,
and every one of my main relationships in life, less so now, but to a point recently,
mm,
let's say until my second Saturn square, waxing square, was dominated by this intense push and pull, and the conflict between my Venus that wants to be enthusiastic and passionate and connect with people about those passions and shine and see people and do the thing that I love, which has been astrology and yoga and weird fringe things for the cult in which I was raised.
mm,
Not a lot of things technically. And the people pleaser in me that just, wants to bend to and be whatever the others have wanted me to be. And so it's
mm,
been this really big push and pull. And lately I'm finding a little bit more of an integration. I'm really
mm.
looking forward to this next Venus retrograde. The last one was in Leo last summer, the summer of 2023, that is.
Yeah.
The next one I'm just really looking forward to because I feel like I'm starting to work it's not exactly a square. My Venus is at 7 degrees of Leo. My Saturn, Pluto, Libra rising are at 27 degrees of Libra,
Mm.
but it's conjunct my moon, which is 0 degrees of Leo, and that's squaring my Sun. So I'm starting to feel a little bit more of an understanding of how to address that square conflict and the intensity of my Venus ruled chart, which is not typically what a Venus ruled chart really is about. But
And I
Venus
think
has been,
that, sorry, no, keep going.
yeah, it's been about my relationship with myself, really.
Mm,
And I feel like I'm really starting to come into that a little bit more the last year or two. So Venus is my love, and she's starting
mm,
to teach me to love right in here first. So that's how that's been
mm.
going.
And that is definitely, a Leo Venus is the relationship with your heart, right? Like this is the relationship of the heart with the heart. But I think Laura's also brought up a great point, is that whilst her chart rule of Venus is in the 10th and, conjunct the moon, it's very Leonian, it's very queen-like, it's the queendom that she is. To have Saturn and Pluto conjunct the ascendant, that's going to also play a big part of life, right? Like we've got to remember that too. And you're actually probably the first astrologer that's talked about, oh, having two planets like that conjunct the ascendant whilst the ruler is in another house and in another sign, right? So it's a really interesting facet of knowing your ascendant, knowing the ruler to where it is, what it's talking to, what it's touching. But if you've got something like Saturn and Pluto on your ascendant too, there's a lot of restriction and limits and lessons there that absolutely being in a cult where you've had to break free and then go into the heart, like your heart has been broken many times and you're repairing that broken heart, and that's very Leo. Like the Leo, oh, I got goosebumps. The Leo heart is the most sensitive heart.
It is. Yeah.
Oh, especially with the
Oh yeah.
moon there too, right?
My goodness. So vulnerable, so exposed. Yeah,
Exactly.
but lots of juicy lessons in it lately. So I'm grateful.
Yeah.
I'm real grateful.
Oh, Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that was great. Each astrologer shared something so different and being able to point us into something else, another facet of the chart, and that those conjunctions to the ascendant really do play a very strong point, as well as that chart ruler, of course. Yeah. So don't forget that, listeners out there, watchers out there. What's conjunct your ascendant? Because that also taints the ascendant on some level. Not taint as a bad thing, but it taints the way that you live. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Flavors
Mm.
everything.
Yes.
Lens the world, how you approach life. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, beautiful. I thought that your Venus was in Leo when I was like writing notes for this. I'm like, I'm pretty sure she's got the Venus in Leo. Yeah. Of course. Oh, well, thank you for sharing, Laura. And yeah, let's get into talking about this very delicious topic of Uranus in Gemini, which is the first time, unless you're over 84 or 85, we've never experienced this in our lifetime. So, as Laura always does, she sets up a really good system. If you go back and watch the other interviews, she's always setting up sort of what the planet represents and how to work with that, and then the sign, and then also the history of that, and then she brings it all together. So I love the way that you teach, and I'm going to sit back and sip my tea and listen, and I look forward to this conversation. So thanks so much, Laura. Uranus in Gemini. Oh God, it's going to be a busy time.
I can already feel it, especially when Uranus was about 25 Taurus. I know it's a very different vibe. We weren't really feeling it, but oh my goodness, that tingle up the spine. I can feel it coming.
Mm.
So, Uranus and Gemini. I'm going to do my Gemini thing, everybody, and I'm going to say it differently every time. Uranus, Uranus, Uranus. I like to, especially in honor of it going into Gemini. So this is huge. Let's go over some dates. We're having Uranus first ingress into Gemini, July 7th, 2025. And down where you are, where would that be? What date
It's
would that be?
also July 7th, 7/7.
Perfect. Okay. And
Yeah.
then that goes until April 26th, 2026, when it goes back into Taurus. For you,
So Uranus is in Gemini from the 7th of the 7th to the 8th of November, and then retrogrades back into Taurus.
you're
Yeah,
right.
but
I'm looking at April
yes,
26th, 2033, which is
yeah,
when it completes its journey. That's right.
okay.
Then November 7th, 2026 to April 26th of 2033 is the rest of that journey. Thank you.
Mm. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
This will affect the signs, anybody with planetary placements or, angles or major indicators in the chart in the signs of Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, or Pisces, all the mutable signs, the double-bodied signs. But let's get into Uranus first. Everything about this planet was just weird. So appropriately Uranian, so Aquarian, ruler of Aquarius, discovered March 13th, 1781 by William Herschel. It happened to be in the sign of Gemini when it was discovered, which is so appropriate for what we're about to learn about, what it means and what it brings. The
Mm.
discovery of the planet itself in 1781 was done by accident. It was a bit of a surprise, which is very Uranian.
Mm.
William Herschel was looking for stars, and he thought at first when he saw this sort of disc-like shape in the sky that he was looking at a comet. And so it was classified as such for a short while until later, surprise, surprise, with mathematic calculations, they realized this thing is slower moving than a comet. This is no comet. This orbit is huge. This is a planet. And so surprise, we have this new planet that we were not looking for.
Mm.
It was about 24 degrees of Gemini upon its discovery, and it also happened to be at the same time that Pluto was in the earliest degrees of Aquarius, which it
Wow,
is now. So consider
amazing.
that to dive into this. The planet has a unique tilt. Its axis is at 98 degrees. And forgive me, no matter how much I've played with this idea, I just don't quite understand how that tilt works in space. But somehow they say Uranus is tilted so much on its axis, it spins on its side.
Mm.
Where up or down in space, I don't know, but on its side through its orbit. So it's not facing upright, I suppose, through its orbit. It's so eccentrically tilted
Mm.
that it has in no other planet does anything quite like that. This
Mm.
extreme tilt of the axis spins on its side, and each pole therefore has 42 years of pure darkness, followed by 42 years of pure light, which I love. Because 42, if you are a Douglas Adams fan, the way that I am, who is such a Uranian character in literature, great author who died back in the 90s, hilarious, like comic fiction writer, about futuristic themes, Starship Titanica, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, classic. And in that book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, if you know, you know. The
Mm.
answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42.
42. Mm. Which is also
So
Uranus opposition, right? It's us having our Uranus opposition at 42. Yeah.
exactly. So its poles swap at that same time. And at 42 years old, but sometimes around 40 years old to 43, but 42 is usually the sweet spot, we end up having our Uranus opposition, which is that peak pinnacle of midlife crisis where we deviate from the plan, the norm, life changes, somehow we break free, which I am
Mhm.
personally really looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm in it and I'm loving it.
I saw you posting about that recently. I'm like, okay, thank you, Tierney. I'm almost
It's
there.
it's delicious, baby.
All right. The composition of this planet is also pretty unique. It's an ice giant, and it is mostly made of hydrogen and helium, much like the Sun and Saturn. However, it's got a huge content of methane, which, unlike those, and methane absorbs red light. And so it appears this blue-green hue, even though it's got all these colors, but it absorbs all the red. So it's got this mysterious glow, and it's a cold atmosphere. Which is so Uranian and Aquarian, this cold, distant, disconnected kind of energy that needs to be objective. It can't be caught up in the human experience, it can't have emotions and feelings and an ego. It's got to be so at a distance that it is separate enough that it can solve the problem without feeling emotionally torn, like
Mm,
a surgeon not working on their own child, working on
yes.
strange,
The
that kind of thing.
detachment, very, very good. Yeah.
Uranus, the planet in astrology, astrologically speaking, it's about rebellion, sudden changes. It's about challenging the status quo, going against the grain and breaking the norm. We know it's about innovation and technology. It's about progress, invention, and forward thinking. Um, Individuality and freedom become extremely important anytime Uranus is involved in anything in a chart. If you've got a conjunction, a square, or something, it's like, I have to do this my own way. I cannot follow the crowd. I have to individuate. So it will be known for causing disruptions, destabilizing whatever it is that's trying to be stable. We all know this from the last several years since 2018 with Uranus in Taurus. You know
Mm,
this very well.
mhm, mhm.
My goodness. And it also leads to breakthroughs.
Mm,
It takes 84 years to revolve all the way around the sun, as we mentioned, and it spends about 7 years in each sign, approximately, a little give or
mm.
take. Now, understanding all of that about Uranus, let's hop over to talk about Gemini and some of the things we know about this sign. Again, a double-bodied sign, it's mutable. It is an air sign, so it is about social connection, mental stimulation, information exchange, things of that nature, all related to the mind. So in Gemini, we find themes around communication, intellect, and versatility. Gemini is a jack of all trades, a master of none. But nobody ever finishes that phrase and says, but being a jack of many is better than one.
That is what I was just waiting for is the bottom. I'm so glad that my beautiful Gemini sister did this because the call that I just recorded just before you, she is a Gemini chart ruler, Mercury in Gemini in the first, Jupiter in Gemini in the first. And she said that exact half a quote. And I said to Cassie, I said, that's only half the quote. I can't remember the other half of it. I love that you have just said it. You need to text me the other half of that. And can you please repeat it really loudly for all those that didn't hear in the back?
Yes, for every Gemini, let's remove the shame. Gemini is a jack of all trades, master of none, but being a jack of many is better than one.
Yes, 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 yes,
We're
yes,
versatile.
yes.
We're
Yes.
dabblers, but
Mm-hmm.
we have versatility. The ability to adapt and change comes with that kind of versatility. Gemini is a channel of energy. My teacher, Deborah Silverman, used to always say the Roman numeral two, if you can picture that Roman numeral two, we have the top line is the heavens right up here. Yeah. Can we see
Mm-hmm.
this from
Yeah.
fine? Oh, blurry here. The bottom line is the earth. There
Mm-hmm.
we go. And the Gemini channel is the open mouth in the middle. Blah, 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 blah. I've got so much to say. Heaven, earth, Gemini learns to listen and grab the right message from the sky and bring it down to earth.
Mm-hmm.
So with this, Geminis have to go out and follow their many varied, vast interests. They don't know why they're into what they're into, and they never stick with anything very long. And they can take a lot of crap in their lives from like, why don't you have any follow through? Why don't you get serious and committed? Well, because I was designed to go collect little ideas. And then I have them all in my back pocket. And when I connect with somebody, they say, I was just thinking about this. And I go, grab just learned this about that. And they go, wow, you just changed my whole perspective and said just the thing I needed to hear. And now I'm going to go on with my path. That's what Gemini's designed to do. We
Mhm.
are messengers, the messengers of the gods. You never know how much your little jack of all tradiness comes in handy as a Gemini. You'll never know how much it impacts other people's lives, but it's a huge, important part of society, of humanity. Gemini has that curiosity, undying curiosity, not with depth, but with multiplicity of subjects, right? An inch deep and a mile wide, but lots of curiosity. The mind becomes very important to Gemini. It's the mental chatter. For my yogis out there, it's the chitta vritti that we are trying to nirodha. It's the identification with the meanderings of the mind. It rules commerce and trade. And this is going to be a really key point as we discuss potential outcomes later, because a lot of us thought, Uranus and Taurus, definitely we're going to see cryptocurrency and decentralized banking. Actually, Gemini and Uranus and Gemini,
Mm.
because Gemini rules commerce and the actual trade of goods and skills and funds. So we're becoming aware of the tools and textiles of money and the value thereof with Uranus in Taurus. But it's when it goes into Gemini that those actual changes in commerce will take hold.
Very
Uh,
true. Great point.
yeah.
Mm.
Gemini rules education systems, the process and practice and art of teaching. It rules information in general. Social media is a Gemini thing. Cars and local transportation, I'm sure we all know. And have you heard that they've just launched the first flying car somewhere in Europe, I believe? So flying cars, the thing that we thought was going to happen when Uranus was in Libra way back in the 60s, 70s,
Mm.
that's a thing now. Officially, it was
Mm.
with the Gemini. We were all
Mm.
waiting for it in the year 2000. Where's the flying cars and where's the underwater communities? Well,
Mm. It's
now we're dealing with
coming.
some, yeah. Then we have language. Gemini is the process of and development of and sharing of language. And every time Uranus comes into Gemini, there's a huge shift in our use of or understanding of or the development of new languages.
Mhm.
Adaptability, we mentioned, it rules siblings and extended family. So this one's a little bit more personal to each of us. It could be universal in that the way that we, in large cultural groups, understand relationships with siblings and extended family, the impact that those have, those kinds of dynamics, and what's appropriate or what's not culturally for people, that might start to shift with Uranus and Gemini. But on a personal level, this can also bring up a lot of destabilization, awareness, a huge shift or upgrade of some kind in your relationships with siblings and extended family.
Mm. Mm.
It also rules things like networking. Anytime we meet people, social media platforms such as LinkedIn or anything that's a little more professional along those lines, Uranus will in Gemini will have a big impact on the ways in which we network and what networking looks like in ways that we can't even imagine right now. How do we meet people and where do we meet people? Which has become a little bit of a crisis, especially through Saturn in Aquarius. But I think in
Mm.
general, in the last decade or two, as technology has evolved and the way that we connect online has evolved, and let's talk about like dating apps for a second. Those aren't necessarily working or feeling satisfying to a lot of users.
Mm.
And Uranus and Gemini feels to me like a big shift in how we go about meeting people, or maybe getting off the apps, or new kinds of apps, or things I can't even imagine at this moment. You know what I mean?
Mm. Mm. Definitely.
In medical astrology, Gemini rules the hands, the lungs, the arms, the eyes, kind of anything you have two of, at least in the upper portions of the body, of the two hemispheres of the brain. And so those parts of the body could somehow go through a little bit of an enhancement and upgrade, even our own awareness of those things. I don't know about you, but a lot of people I've spoken with, and myself included, because I have my Chiron there, have had a lot of neck stuff or neck
Mm.
tension or injuries that have brought more awareness to the throat, the thyroid, the neck, as Taurus rules the neck, as
Mm.
Uranus has gone through the sign of Taurus. Have you
Yeah.
experienced it before?
Yeah. Neck, definitely. Yeah, for sure. I've had a lot of stuff with my fingers, actually. But I've got Saturn going through my sixth, so I think that there's also that, the bones. But yeah, no, but it is very fascinating. Yeah, for sure. Mm.
Super interesting. Okay, so now let's take a look at what Uranus in Gemini might look like. I also want to mention as I dive into this, we have to consider that it's not just Uranus in Gemini. Um, it's going to have a period of time where it trines Pluto in Aquarius in the early degrees. This is the unreal tech boom that like people kind of anticipated in the year 2000. This is the Aquarian age launching into the kinds of technological advancements that we haven't been able to fathom until this point. We will see the emergence of things like new ideologies. We have to say it, and this is not to cast fear, but awareness, because fear is never a productive use of astrology. There will be wars. There will be conflict. There will be massive social uprising. Modernism might emerge again in art and culture. We'll see rapid intellectual and technological advancements, of course, but intellectual advancements, the capacity of human beings to understand. Have you heard, Tierney, about that study that was conducted? I have no information on this study. Just off the top of my head, I remember. This study that was conducted where they taught a small controlled group of people to find a number of faces in an image with, so many faces hidden in the image. They tested people, a little control group, to see how many faces they could find, and they found a low average number. And then they took that same image and they went across the world to other controlled groups of people that had absolutely no contact with the original group, and they told them where all the faces were. And then they took that image and they went to another controlled group that had no connection with these first two, and they asked them to find the faces. And those people could find the majority of the faces, where the first groups couldn't find very many at all until they planted the knowledge, the understanding in a portion of humanity, just a small group isolated. But once it was in the consciousness,
Yeah.
it spread, and this new group was able to find more faces. This is the idea.
Yeah. The
So,
ether, hey, like speaking it into reality. Yeah.
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 And the idea that we're all connected, the yogis have an understanding. I'm sure most people out there have heard of the chakras, the chakras, the energy center wheels up the spine. There's many different systems or forms. There's a classic 7 chakra system. There's a 9, there's a 200 chakra system. But the idea that we have an extra one, the 9 chakra system, one above the crown, there, and one down way below the root that's underneath the surface of the earth, that is a shared root chakra. The same with the consciousness, the super consciousness one above the crown chakra that is shared. In so understanding, it is said that human beings are the largest organism on the earth, as opposed to the current understanding that a group of mycelium in Oregon, the state where I live actually, is the largest organism, as it is connected underneath the surface of the earth all by this one network of mushrooms. That we are like that. We are the largest organism. Although that's a little Homo sapiens centric, isn't it? We
I
are
love
the
this.
largest.
Yeah, yeah. I love this.
So what my point here is that this kind of Uranus in Gemini is bringing this sort of surge in the capacity of human beings to be conscious and to be connected. Our capacity for taking in information. It takes several Uranus in Gemini cycles to increase the awareness of human beings and our ability to learn and to connect. So there's something about this transit that will actually enhance everyone's capacity to think and learn. That being said, it might come to pass by first having a total disrupt in our ability to think critically, a difficulty in understanding what is real that pushes us to that sort of intellectual crisis and an enhancement in consciousness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Absolutely. And just you talking about that too, it reminded me to also share that the Gemini house, it is raising and slipstreaming into a new consciousness because we've had the North Node in Gemini, the Mars retrograde in Gemini, and Jupiter in Gemini. So it's actually being really lubed up, and there's a lot of destined, there's a lot of information that over the past few years, if you've been really plugged into your Gemini house, Uranus is going to come and disrupt and disturb. But I really also thought about when you're talking about this connection again with Jupiter in Gemini in 2024 into midway of 2025, that hive mentality, like where it's like a beehive, right? So it's very similar to what you were saying there about the that connection and the ethers. I just that all just like was like boom, 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 like landed like yes, there it is. I've got a Gemini ninth house, so hello. Yeah, as you do too. We've got that Gemini night, so we're like thinking very big right
So
now.
excited, yeah. I cannot wait for this transit because of that, as you
Same,
know. It has
same.
not been so fun. So yeah. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
Uranus, I love the way you said that, by the way. We're being lubed up and all this Gemini, the
Mm,
North Node Gemini, the Mars retrograde, the Jupiter. That's so true.
yeah. There's been a lot of little hits, right?
Yeah. Oh my
Mm,
goodness. My little
yeah.
Gemini heart knows it.
Your Gemini heart does know it.
Okay, so we're looking at a lot of new elevated perspectives, increasing consciousness. There's no more going through the motions. This is the funny thing that Gemini can do because of that fickle nature, which has its upsides. It can kind of peter out and like end up going through the motions of just, I got to do this thing. It gets bored. Gemini
Mm,
gets so bored. And so when we're locked into the mundane or the routine, very much we can just get in our heads and go through the motions and kind of disembody and it's almost like a dissociation. If we were in Pisces waterland, it'd totally be we just dissociate. The
mm,
Gemini just kind of like da, 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 plods along, or loses focus, but goes through the motions of the thing they're doing. No more, not
mm,
allowed when is in Gemini. There is an awareness of the importance of mental health, of focus and concentration, though with all this Gemini, that will be disrupted in order for us to find and practice it. Mental health practices and support, the use of therapy in a multiplicity of different ways, kind of destandardizing or just breaking the mold when it comes to therapeutic practices that enhance mental health. Breath work becoming both more of the rage. I was about to say all the rage. I'm like, it had its heyday.
mm,
More of the rage and also equally shown how dangerous it can be. We'll see it go in both directions in
mm,
different opinions about breath work and the
mm,
benefits or dangers.
mm,
We'll be crying for intellectual freedom. I just want to pause on that one, let everybody feel that for a second.
mm,
Intellectual freedom as a cult survivor. This is hugely important to me. And as we are just finally out of Saturn in Aquarius, oh my God, and
mm,
we are now in Pluto in Aquarius, really important to all of us.
mm,
Pretty massively important. So
mm,
please, out there, everyone, under this transit, cry for freedom of the intellect.
mm,
Uh, we might be seeing things like a decentralization of the internet, banks, social media platforms. This I'm excited for, and I do not think will come quickly or easily.
mm,
This is a process of taking control of those kinds of platforms and systems back into the power over them back into the hands of the people or into the hands of the people in the first place.
mm,
Um, but that kind of change, specifically with decentralized internet, social media platforms, and potentially banks in this like cryptocurrency kind of world, that level of change, I think, is the number one change in all of these, predictions of Uranus and Gemini that will be possibly the most revolutionary for the world.
mm,
And I do say that with a steady period at the end, even in lieu of having mentioned wars. It's
mm,
those changes in how we access and share information and how we have power over our or control over access to information will change the way that people are advertising, the way that money goes out for all kinds of media, what media gets shown and most highly produced because of where it's coming from and who has the money. We won't have to, fight for top dollar because we're producing the message that this platform or this person or this company wants us to produce. Instead, we are in control and we, the people, rise with our common voices and say what we want to say, not what the
mm,
money tells us that we're going to say. You know what I mean?
mm, mm,
I'm really
mm.
big.
Yeah,
With
huge.
that comes an AI revolution. This one's a little bit creepy. This
Mm,
one's going to see AI translators, which will have a lot of pitfalls for a while and probably hilarious and probably catastrophic at some
mhm,
point. We're going to see AI generated news. A lot of thoughts about that, but I'll just leave it there.
mhm, mhm,
We'll see AI assistants. Also really interesting in the positive ways that can go and the chaos that could ensue.
mm,
But all of this is just really exciting. Like, wow, the future is here with this transit. I'm also really excited about education. both systems of education, especially as we consider, Saturn in Pisces, not squaring Uranus at any point in this journey, but just Saturn being in a mutable sign that happens to be a sign as a whole that's square to Gemini. I think
Mm,
there's some interesting conflict in there. What is real? How do we creatively engage in education? How do we share fact and separate it from fiction? There's a messy world in there to be sorted through.
mm, mm,
Um, I'm excited for personalized learning and the way that the information boom will arrive, and that consciousness is expanded and everybody's hungry for knowledge and curious. We have that thirst for knowledge expanding or just exploding open in all unexpected directions with Uranus and Gemini.
mm,
I think both geniuses will be born under this transit, especially in the early stages with the trine to Pluto, and people who are already living will have a massive upgrade in their own intellect and get hungry for knowledge at any given age. All of a sudden, wow, I want to go online to this decentralized university and study this thing for a reasonable cost. I'm going to do it. And no
mm,
longer does the money dictate who gets to learn what.
mm.
And maybe no longer does the degree dictate who's an expert in what. Maybe
Definitely.
that which is produced speaks for itself after a
Mm.
while.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Kind of love that part of it, is the education part. We
Yeah.
know, I don't know how it is there for you in Australia, but the education system in the States, all across the board, is just kind of crumbling. Is it
Mm.
similar?
Well, it's just different. I think because you guys, like university or college or whatever you call it, like it's just such an ingrained thing. Like you want to get in, you do it. Whereas, I mean, I've been thinking for years, like university, schmuniversity, like who needs degrees these days? Like you don't need those things like MBAs and shit like that. It's that sort of stuff is changing. It's evolving into something very different. And yeah, careers and universities and colleges as we know it, like that is definitely going through a huge shift. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exciting. That one feels like it's been overdue for a while,
Yeah, definitely. I
regrettably.
think in America, Australia, I don't know, maybe some parents like are very like, oh my God, my child needs to go to university. I would say that
Mm.
we're most of us are just too relaxed to care, like not saying that we don't care about education, but also like happiness, do what makes you happy, like you don't need a degree to make you better or make you happier or make you successful. I mean, some of the most successful people in the world never went to university. So I think that, yeah, the tides are turning with that for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
That was a pretty big, exciting one.
Defs.
Online education revolution, both from accredited universities, accredited schools for whatever, whether it's trade, if you can access the trade online, or
Mm.
information, that is going to explode and again be decentralized. Critical thinking skyrocketing or plummeting. Oh, I'm repeating myself now here. Local activism. I love this. We know Gemini rules your own neighborhood, what's right around your house in your local community, walking around town, riding your bike, driving your car. And having, especially with the trine to Pluto, I think is finally going to bring the voices. We with Uranus in Libra back in the late 60s, early 70s, we saw this huge boom in social justice movements, and everybody was coming out and holding hands together. And at least here in the States, there was this huge movement. But with Uranus in Gemini, it doesn't have quite the contracted staying power of a cardinal sign like Libra. It has this sort of sporadic, I bump into you and I bump into this person and oh sorry, oh, nice to meet you. My name is, it's a little more haphazard than a Libran contract.
Mm.
And it's with that combination of double-bodiedness, mutability with Uranian energy in terms of social justice movements, social uprise, voices. Gemini voices will rise in a way that they haven't been able to since the 60s, 70s. And we thought they might, especially like I remember here in the States with COVID, Black Lives Matter and all these, it felt like this surge of like, wow, it's coming back. We're all going out into the streets and doing this thing. And then it kind of fell flat and felt a little lackluster. Uranus in Gemini is the first time that Uranus has been in an air sign since it was in Libra. Well, that's not true. It was in Aquarius. Excuse me. But it is in its tour through Aquarius, it was more about the technology. And in Gemini, it's more about the ideas, the information, the
Mm.
perspective change. And so many voices are going to come up and say, hey, this is my perspective that has never been, posted out there loudly. And now that we have a decentralized platform where I can actually speak up and be seen fairly, you're going to hear this new perspective breaking out, and that many people might have it that never were able to join together before and share. So
Mm.
this can happen on a very small scale locally in your own town, your own community. I think we might see more activism, more active activism,
Mm.
but also online and in social media spaces.
Mm.
Misinformation alert. I have like 10 stars by this one.
Mhm.
You know, not all information is true information. And I think a huge part of this Pluto Capricorn into Pluto and Aquarius transition is a lot about, this is of course through my cult experience lens,
Mm.
that Pluto in Capricorn is so much about the dark side of systems of power and control and dominance. And that's cult 101. It's about control and power and money and free labor. It's very Pluto in Capricorn. And into Aquarius, this is groups of people, and potentially group think, group ideologies. That can be a little more Sagittarian energy at times, but Aquarius can have a way, like I think of my fourth house cusp, my nadir, 0 degrees of Aquarius, late Capricorn, early Aquarius. I know a lot of people are like, cusps don't exist, but I call it if it's at 0 degrees, and I feel it. Capricorn and Aquarius on my root, a long family tradition, history, hundreds of years of living in this cult. That is
Mm.
very much my nature and where I was rooted. So that transition of Pluto Capricorn into Aquarius speaks to me so much of a journey of people who are trying to break out of that sort of control and find the freedom and the freedom of thought and the freedom to access and share information. But people who haven't been able to deconstruct their own, the way they were trained to think in their upbringing, can be locked into, magical thinking, or a lack of critical thinking or emotional thinking. And that can spread and, wreak havoc through misinformation.
Mm.
So it's going to be increasingly more and more important as Uranus moves into the later degrees of Gemini for people to, as their curiosity increases,
Mm.
to be more and more mindful of sources and vetting the people from whom they're gathering information, and learning how to fact check, because there's just going to,
Discernment.
yeah, discernment. That's it.
Discernment. Exclamation mark, right? Don't believe everything you think, and don't believe everything you read, and don't believe everything you hear. Don't believe everything you say, that that is being said. Yeah, critical thinking is and common sense, unfortunately, aren't very common, and that is why this group mentality and this sort of, there's a lot of clinging on to these ideologies or whatever they are, and everyone just sort of like flicks to one thing, and then 2 weeks later that can often change, and then all of a sudden, like now with that, because that was a lie, or because it was AI and it wasn't actually a real person saying those things, but you clung to it, and then the facts came out. And so just be, it's just a time, I think Uranus in Gemini will be very a lot, and it's still the invitation to step back to make sure that you're in your own emotional intelligence as well.
Yes, yes, yes. Because it's not, we don't want to get trapped in emotional thinking, but
Mm.
emotional intelligence is a different thing. And that's going to be really interesting as Uranus goes into Gemini and Jupiter goes into Cancer.
Mm.
That's an interesting duo. So I'm
Mm.
really excited to hear this panel's take on
Mm.
Jupiter and Cancer too.
Mm.
Um, okay. Social justice movements. We're looking
Mm.
at technology empowering marginalized voices. So I was saying with that, the kinds of voices that get seen, especially because of decentralized platforms, but accelerated social change, resistance against censorship. I can't wait for somebody to be like, I was about to comment on YouTube, and then I realized we're posting this on YouTube. The things we're allowed to say.
Mm.
The man is watching. Oh, like, let's stop this nonsense of being afraid of a word,
Mm.
Um, New economic models like tokenized communities, which when I first looked into this, I didn't know what a tokenized community was.
Mm.
And it's a bit like having, you have a subscription to something, except you
Mhm.
buy a token, or you buy a token every few months or something, and it gives you entry to this community. It gives you access to the information they share. And again, with that comes the danger, especially as Saturn and Neptune come together, which brings culty vibes for a
Mm,
lot of locked in ideologies and groupthink. And so, be careful which groups you are subscribing to, which tokenized communities you might join, because it may not feel like you're getting into a situation or a trap, especially if it's online. That doesn't feel like anything too boxed in or
mm,
controlling, but be mindful.
And the love bombing, the love bombing in the
Oh,
communities makes you feel good and makes you feel like you're special and that you're going to earn the money and that you're going to do all these things. But common sense is just not that common, darlings. All isn't as it seems. All that glitters is not gold. And I think that moving forward, that is something to remember. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I love common sense is not common. I hear that kind of thing all my life, and I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, no, but I have common sense. It's fine.
Mm.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't until I deconstructed a cult upbringing.
Mm.
Critical thinking is quite a high skill,
Yeah.
it turns out, if you're
Absolutely.
taught not to. And I think
Yeah.
many of it. So this is a liberation for the mind, for
Mm.
humanity.
Yeah.
Um, I'm probably most excited of all in terms of technology about open source innovation. Because so many platforms will be decentralized, the capacity for collaborating contributors to drop in and share their bits and pieces of whatever puzzle is being built in any avenue of technology. Can you imagine? I mean, I can't. That's kind of
Mm.
it's so beyond the
Mm.
wild possibilities are available with this kind of open source platforming for
Mm.
innovation and contribution.
Yeah,
Love
sure.
that.
Yeah.
Freedom of speech and data privacy issues. Um, please, everybody, check your, get yourself covered, because we had that big data breach. Was it worldwide? Is that right? Or am I just boxed into
Yeah, I think so.
worldwide? That's what
I
I feel
don't
like I've heard.
probably. I don't really hear a lot or know a lot
Right.
when it
Well, there
comes
was
to
even
that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Whether it was stateside or worldwide, I just
Mm,
keep hearing this all encompassing, like the biggest data breach of all time. It's like we haven't
mm,
seen it yet. So, get your stuff locked down. Our online information and
mm. Identity
presence and content,
fraud will be
yeah,
huge. Mm,
huge commodities for thieves. Just
hmm
okay. What I'd like to do now is go through a little list of I've taken the time to highlight some of the more significant things that have happened in past Uranus and Gemini cycles,
mm.
starting way back with 10 BC, and then I'll highlight these 12 or so periods and bring it to present. And then
Mm,
we're going to talk about how to get through this cycle with your
mm,
sanity intact.
mm.
It's not that bad, but how to survive this next cycle. So way back, 10 BC to 3 AD. This is the time of Jesus' birth. And
Mm,
that was the first cycle I pulled up of Uranus in Gemini. So hello, Jesus.
mm,
And then in 94, the years 94 to 101 AD was the Roman Empire and kind of considered to be one of the highest points, or at least the early high point of the Roman Empire. So there was this expansion and this massive, breaking out of this huge empire, society, social connections kind of changed, the Roman neighborhood spread, that kind of experience. 514 to 521 AD, they experienced the fall of the Western Roman Empire. So huge disrupt to society and culture. 598 to 605 AD was the spread of Christianity across Europe. So we see this spread of ideologies.
mm,
In 1102 to 1109 AD were the first Crusades. It was actually just at the end of the first Crusades. But then in 1186 to 1193, it was smack through the Third Crusades. So again, we have this sweeping ideology taking over. If that tells you anything about what we were talking about, like the groupthink and
mm,
the culty
mm,
vibes, the control. So be mindful of that sweeping through of ideas. Um, in 1270 to 1277, Marco Polo goes east. It was actually 1275 when he took his first tour of the Eastern realms. So big, again, expanding like what neighborhoods are we aware of? What societies have we not met? Who do we make contact with here? How
mm,
new languages to be discovered, those kinds of
Exploration, hey. Yeah,
exploration.
amazing. Yeah.
And then we have 1438 to 1445. was the Gutenberg printing press invention, right in
Oh,
those years.
of course.
Yeah, so a huge upgrade in how we communicate, in the spread
Mm,
of information. 1690 to 1697 was the scientific revolution. That was the time period in which Isaac Newton was doing his thing. And then 1774 to 1781 was the American Revolution. It was also the early part of the Industrial Revolution.
mm,
Huge expansion and, upgrades.
mm,
In 1858 to 1865 was the American Civil War. It also included the time period in which we had the invention of the telephone and the telegraph.
mm.
And so again, upgrades in
Wow.
communication.
Wild.
Mm-hmm. And then most recently, 1942 to 1949, World War II.
Mm,
So this is the first time that Uranus has been in Gemini since the massive, modern era and the boom of the internet. Consider that back in 1438 to 1455, during the time period in which the Gutenberg printing press was invented, we had that invention, this huge upgrade in how we connect and communicate. Let's take that as the last big boom, akin to or kind of parallel to in the internet, the advent of how we connect via internet.
mm,
Right after that, the next cycle was the American Revolution and the early Industrial Revolution. So consider the massive shift. The Gutenberg press was a teeny little happening. And then it
mm.
was like, boom, the next cycle of Uranus and Gemini, massive. The last
Yeah.
cycle of Uranus and Gemini was World War II. Now we have the internet. Can you even imagine
Mm,
what possibly could emerge since all of the technological booms that have come into place since World War II?
mm.
Unfathomable.
It is. It is.
Get ready to have your mind just completely blown.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some tips for staying sane through this
Mm.
transit.
Let's do that. That is, yeah, great overview though, Laura. I love, your historian ways, darling. I remember. It's just so incredible to see, the telephone being invented and then even in the discovery of Uranus, Uranus, the discovery in general of Uranus. And then when that coincided with, what happened with Pluto back in Aquarius, like just all of these little puzzle pieces coming together and then giving us this overview. And yeah, as much as we are, opening or sharing these things, it's still a mystery. Like we are still just as excited and like, wow, what is going to actually happen? Because yeah, from 1943 to now, look at the world. Like it's a completely different place. And so, yeah, imagine this next 7-year cycle of Uranus in Gemini, like what it's actually going to bring to the forefront. So, no, I really appreciate all of those dates. I think that it's really great to know the history of, and thanks for going all the way back to Jesus. Amen, darling. Like that's wild. I wasn't even going back that far, but I love that you did. And I love that we've got these signature points to look at from that. I love this. Yeah, that was just brilliant. Brilliant.
Well, staying alive.
Yeah,
Staying alive.
staying alive. Yeah, staying alive survival guide from Laura to get through Uranus and Gemini.
And it's going to sound kind of trite, the number one thing. Embrace change.
Mm,
Embrace change and never stop embracing it. It's like, okay, get ready for change. And people are, okay, I'm ready for this one turn of an angle. No, it's like
mm,
every single aspect of your life, every perspective, it's all going to necessarily be completely jumbled tower card moment so
mhm,
that you can reassemble. Uranus is a very deconstructive, reconstructive energy. The more you can allow yourself to accept it, accept the shift. The double biting signs will generally do better in this, all the mutable signs. Probably the air signs will handle a little better. I'm sorry
mm.
to my Taurus friends who, although you've got that Gemini Mercury. Do you have any other planets in Gemini?
Yeah, I've got a full air trine. Yeah, a
Oh,
grand air trine. So yeah, I'm just like I'm so fine.
yep. So embrace change. Be open. Breath work.
Mm,
Please be mindful not to go too extreme with anything like that. Like, Wim Hof is great, but please don't maybe do it in water to extremes. It can be risky. Just be mindful and I want to say use common sense, but what
mm.
about common sense have we learned
That's
lately?
right, exactly.
Hmm. Meditation. Oh my
Mm,
goodness. just even a minute. I know, I was like, I don't have the time to sit down, shut up, take a breath
Mm,
once in a while.
mm,
You're going to need to ground. And
mm,
it's going to be kind of strange, I think, because while I haven't lived Uranus in Gemini, my Gemini stellium with Mars combust on my Sun and North Node is just like spun out all the time. And if I don't take the time to ground on the regular, oh my goodness. So
mm.
I would imagine that this will just be a huge, like taking flight almost in every direction. A little bit much if we can't treat our nervous systems well, which leads me to the next point. Tend to your nervous systems, darlings. And I mean, with rich, fatty, nutritious food, your nervous system loves good, healthy fats. With good amounts of sleep, regular cycles, with great exposure to sunlight, especially first thing when you wake up, if you can access sunlight, with slowing down and walking barefoot on the earth, with being in connection with people that you love, with doing cozy things in the cold time and invigorating, expansive, exploring things in the warm times, and just taking time to make sure that the part of you that is Uranian, your nervous system, which is aware of everything inside of you and outside of you at all times. I'm talking about the temperature of every cell and the dog hair on your shoulder and the mood of your roommate next door and your the sound in the background and the knot in your stomach, everything. It's aware of every detail of you all the time. Your thinking mind, Mercury, cannot, but your nervous system knows.
Mm,
And if you can learn to connect those two together, hello, Uranus in Gemini,
mm.
that is, I think, where the secret is. People learn as much as you can about your nervous system needs and how to really care for it well. We're going to
Yeah.
need that.
Mm, mm. And just another like side note here too, remembering that Mercury, which is Uranus is going to be in Mercury's sign of Gemini, is the lower octave of Uranus. So Uranus is the higher mind, the divine, the inspiration, Uranus, and I know that there's the Prometheus story about Uranus as well, but it was a god as the sky god giving birth with Gaia, the earth, Pachamama. And so this higher crown, stellar gateway chakra, soul star chakra, the one that also Laura talked about, the one that's connected to everyone, but also your own, is going to be heightened and accelerated with it being in Mercury's home sign. So we're looking at the higher and lower octaves of the brain, of the mind, of the nervous system, of anxiety, of mental overload, of all of this information and busy energy coming in. The fact that Uranus is going to be in Mercury's sign really is heightening the cerebral activity. And these tips are very much around being in your body. And hopefully, like I've been sharing on my podcast all year and also, this cycle, if you're not embodied in your practice in life, well, this sort of cycle can really, the mental instability is going to be next level. Like it's going to really fling far mental health, which it already has, of course. We've already seen that and it will continue to, because Uranus in Taurus has been teaching us, and then Jupiter in Taurus was embodiment, digesting life, being in your body, experiencing and slowing down and savoring life. So if you're not capable of doing those things or you haven't learnt those things, this transit is like acceleration plus because Uranus is in, you know, Mercury, Gemini's sign of Mercury. So there's again the double whammy when it comes to our higher mind and lower mind, these octaves working together. So I think, and when you pointed out that Uranus was actually discovered when he was in Gemini, I'm just like, it's sort of like a Uranus return in a way. Like it's not, but it is, there's something sort of return, like we're returning to the source of where everything was. So it's very fascinating. Yeah, but that's just something to definitely pay attention to. The Mercury retrogrades are going to amp up, especially with the South Node in Virgo next year, 2025, 2026. So really paying attention to the mind and exactly what Laura said, the nervous system, slowing all the way down and getting in the body and not just sort of cutting yourself off from here and living like a floating head, which is going to be very easy to do.
Yeah, I think if you've never experienced that kind of embodiment before, I know I hadn't. That's, back to my little cult upbringing, that's what cults do. They want you disembodied and to
Mm,
not think. teach you thought-stopping techniques and to get out of your body and be busy, busy, busy working for them. And that
True.
was my life
Yeah.
until I became a yogi and started to get embodied and have had to work for it constantly on my Gemini to try and get it down in there. And I think of you every time that I'm really struggling with it. I think of your book. What's the title? Magic in the Mundane. Tell us again.
Yeah, everyday enlightenment, magic in the mundane. Yeah.
That's
And I think what
it.
you're saying too about cult, like, I mean, it's just like society is a cult. And if you can be immune to that and be, again, discerning and not be sucked into to that, very different than what Laura experienced. But I'm talking like on a general level too, right? Like that is the thing. They want you, they to be living from here, right? Like that's what they want. Like you said, they want you working for them, busy, too busy to actually feel things. And this is where Lilith's in Scorpio next year. Like this is about embodiment, sovereignty, answering to no one and knowing yourself, being autonomous.
Love it. Preach.
Mm, mm. Yeah,
I think my last couple of thoughts here to
yeah.
close this would be for survival tips and tricks.
Mm,
Um, Set boundaries
mm,
for yourself, for the amount of information you are consuming and sharing, for the amount you're interacting with others, especially ideas that are not sitting well in your nervous system, not shut down, not thought stopping, not close, head in the sand, but consider that information is going to have to be digested through the nervous system at a vastly more accelerated rate than any human on this planet, except for those in their 80s and beyond, have ever experienced. So we need to understand how to metabolize it differently, and that's going to require that we like taper off how much we're engaging. I don't think we will be able to engage with content and information and being in the head, in the mind so much as we have been able to over the last, couple of Uranus cycles through the last couple of signs. A little different, right? As it moves
true.
into an air sign. We're gonna have to
Very
metabolize
true.
it differently, like an information diet, for a while.
Definitely.
And then trust your intuition. Uranus, I think the only thing I didn't say about him that I wanted to say is that he is often associated with Kundalini energy and that spiralic, coiled energy moving up and down the spine simultaneously. That energy wants to speak to you, wants to bring messages from your soul essence up through the spinal column into your body and into your mind. That has got to be the source. And it's too easy in this world, always, at least in my life experience, but especially lately, to be pulled by these external sources, answers, and information. And there will be no greater source for you to find your deep answers, your needs, your security, and your yes and your no,
Mm,
than connecting into your core self, your true self. So finding a connection to your intuition, I think, is going to be a requirement of, it's so dramatic. Whatever. I'm Leo, Moon, and Venus. Survival. People need it to survive.
mm. Yes.
That's all.
Be dramatic. We want the drama. And and I think very interesting. Like I said, I've just done two interviews back to back, and on both pages with what Cassie said and what you've just said, same thing has come through. What you consume consumes you, and I think that that's also a big thing when it comes to what people are sharing. Like when you share things online, whether it's just a click of a share or you're reposting whatever, what you share you are, and we're forgetting that. So be very mindful exactly these tips that Laura has just given of what you are consuming, because it eats you if you are eating it, right? So it's just, again, it is the discernment, it is having the boundaries, like Laura said, like, hope maybe less screen time, maybe it's, there's a real different management around, again, what you're ingesting every day and digesting into your soul, into your ether, into your body, because it's going to be a lot. Like it just is, it really is. And so I just wanted to also recap that Uranus will be in Gemini in 2025 from the 7th of the 7th to the 8th of the 11th. So we're getting that, again, that prequel before he fully moves in 2026. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
There is one more thing that we didn't
Go.
say about this in Gemini. My little Gemini heart is so divided on this right now. as I'm trying to get away from magical thinking and this cult-like groupthink and, learn critical thinking skills and take my mind and my mental sovereignty back.
Mm,
I spent a good amount of time post-cult, post-atheist pocket window where most cult survivors go through,
mm,
post religious resurgence and world religion studying, that I slipped hard into what I'm going to call the cult of the New Age.
mm,
Loosely, all right? I'm not saying like it's a cult, but there's some I got sucked into some stuff. You know what I mean? No
mm,
real groups, but just ways of thinking that I was not seeing things clearly. I wasn't checking. I was just taking it as, yeah, they say this, that sounds true. You know what I mean?
yeah,
One of those ideas was that you
yeah.
create reality. Thoughts become things you can manifest. And for a while, I was in it. I was so about it. It wasn't working for me. I didn't realize that I had a lot of stuff going on. And so
Mm,
I left it and I started healing myself and taking care of my stuff. And then it started proving itself to me in little weird ways
mm,
where my thoughts, the things I would ruminate on, started showing up. And it became so evident and so apparent, especially as Uranus approaches my 29-degree Mercury in Taurus,
mm,
that I'm like, wow, okay. I think one of the things that I'm hoping, I'm excited about, I want it to be true, that might emerge is a real awareness of the power of the mind.
mm,
So watch your thoughts, darlings, because
mm.
as a person thinketh, so are they.
Exactly. What you think you are.
Mhm.
Definitely the power of the mind. Oh, such a rich, so much information. I'm sure everyone's got lots of notes. I certainly did. Take lots of notes. Thank you so much, Laura. That has given us such a rich feeling around, what we're about to move through. Uranus in Gemini. It is a big transit, is a big signature of 2025. So I really hope that you've enjoyed Laura's unfolding and unpacking and giving you some tips to survive this. Thank you so much for your time today, Laura. Thank you for sharing all of this so passionately. We really appreciate you here on the panel.
I love you so much. Thanks for having me. It's always good to be here.
So much love. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you soon. Bye.